Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Please consider subscribing and check out our Patreon for more. Enjoy the video. Putting my hands on the mirror in the bathroom, I looked at myself. With my golden blonde hair reaching over, I opened my purse and took out lip gloss. As I took the cap off the tube, I slowly wound the phallic tip around it. From the tube, it was a bright pink color. When I put it to my lips, I looked in the mirror and asked myself, "How did I get here?" I told myself. As I stood in the bathroom, getting ready to put lipstick on my full, pouty lips, I faked having long, golden blonde hair and wore a short black dress, black nylons, and shoes with a 4-inch heel. I looked like any other woman's secretary, but I wasn't a woman. I wasn't born one anyway. My boss and lover, who would become my wife, helped me become one. My old life seemed like a dream and not real life, like a fantasy that someone else had experienced. It began when I was 21 years old, 2 years ago. I had just graduated from college and went to a middle-ranking college and got a good honors degree, but nothing amazing. I thought it would be easy to get a job after I graduated from college, but after 3 months, I still hadn't found a job, even though I had a degree and my mood was getting worse. Then one day, while reading the appointment section of a newspaper, I came across a job ad that really interested me, but I had never heard of the company in the ad called the Labries Group. I searched the web for the company, but couldn't find anything, so I sent in my application for the job, and 2 weeks later, I got a letter telling me I had a job interview. After 2 weeks, I parked my car in the visitors' parking lot at the Labries Group. I made sure I had all the right papers before I went to the group's huge business headquarters, did some work, and got out of the car. I went up and through the doors and toward the front desk. A very pretty woman was sitting behind the desk, and looking at her, I saw that she was wearing a white shirt with a high neck and short sleeves and a short black jacket. She finally put down the phone and looked at me. "I'm sorry for the delay. Could I help you?" I told her I was here for an interview and gave her my letter about the meeting. She took the letter and scanned it. "Of course, if you could please take a seat over there with those other gentlemen," she said, pointing to a group of about 6 other guys. "Someone will be with you soon," she added. I said, "Thank you," and then turned around to join the other guys. It did seem a little strange that only guys were being interviewed, but I didn't think it was that strange. But now that I know what I know now, I would have been very clear. When I sat down, the other men and I exchanged a few quiet nods. Within the next 5 to 10 minutes, 5 more guys joined us, and I was sitting there when I heard the click-click of heeled shoes on a wood floor. I looked toward the noise and saw her again. She was about average height and blonde. Legs were wrapped in light-colored nylons, and she wore black shoes with 3-inch heels that went with a black skirt. She wore a red silk shirt that matched the color of her hair, nails, and lips. She approached the front desk and spoke to the receptionist. Then she turned around and came over to us. "I'm here to lead you through. We're missing a few people, but they'll need to be late. We'll go through if you want to follow me," she said. We followed her. I remember that she led us into a room with rows of desks. There were 15 seats, and there were 12 of us, so we were 3 short. "Please sit down at one of the desks, and I'll be right back," she said, and then she left the room. The other guys went and sat down at different desks, and I just waited. After 2 or 3 minutes, 3 more guys came in, followed by the woman, who said, "Please take a seat, and thank you for your patience." She left the room again. As we waited, I could hear some of the men beginning to become antsy and angry. I felt the same way, but showed it much better. The women then came back, but this time she was with another woman. There was no better way to show how different the 2 women were. This new woman was wearing a black trouser suit. She looked boring and older, but seemed to be in charge, while the other woman was deferential to this new lady. She stood in front of us and said, "Thank you for coming today. First, there is an ability test, and then there will be a personal interview later this afternoon. My assistant, Tony, will now distribute the tests. Please feel free to use pencils when you answer the questions. The more you answer, the better your chances are." Then she nodded to Tony, and she went ahead and distributed the papers and pencils as she left. You have 45 minutes to finish the test and hand in your papers to Tony. Thank you again and good luck, she said, and then she left the room. I looked down at the paper on the test, but I couldn't think of anything. I shook my head to clear it and tried to concentrate on the test. I only had 20 minutes left on the test when I finally got back to it. With only a few minutes left, I hastily wrote down my answers. Time's up, she said. Please make your name stand out on the front of your paper, then hand it to the person in front of you. If you'd like to follow me, she got up and walked over to collect the papers. Have lunch on us, she said. Following her out of the room, we got up. When we did, we were greeted by another woman. Hello, Tony. Miss Ross told me to collect the papers. While you take care of our guests, she told him. I looked at her as she spoke. She was the same height as Tony, wearing a yellow silk shirt, a short gray skirt, and another pair of light-colored nylons and gray court shoes with the same 3-inch heels. The new girl had long, dark hair that fell down more than her shoulders. Thank you, Tony told Andrea, and then she handed her the test papers. She turned around and left. We went with Tony down a hallway and up some stairs, then through a set of security doors and stopped outside a set of doors. She turned to us and said, Ladies and gentlemen, this is the special dining area for our executives. I think you're in for a treat. Then she opened the door, and we went inside. Once I walked through those doors and looked around, I knew I had entered a different world. The dining hall was large, and beautiful women dressed as maid outfits served food in uniforms with black silk cloth and shoes with 4-inch heels. We followed Tony to a table, and she asked us to please sit down. Being seated, I looked down and saw that Tony had chosen the seat next to me. My jaw dropped. What even was going on? A maid came over and asked, Would you like to order now? Yes, Tony said, and then we placed our orders. The maid then stood up and walked away. In the back of my mind, I began to think about everything I had seen in the kitchen today. It really started to bother me. There were 2 very distinct types of women here. Tony and the maids, who were very feminine, maybe even overly so, with big hair and dresses with skirts. The others, like Miss Ross and the women I could see in the dining hall, dressed and behaved almost like men. Then it hit me like a ton of bricks. There were only 2 types of people in the dining room. I hadn't seen any other men all day. Hey, did you understand the test questions? One of the men spoke. I didn't really answer. Someone else commented. I could remember the test questions. Most of them were strange. It seemed like a normal day, but the last group was all about our views of women and how we would handle being told what to do by a woman. I couldn't even remember the answer I gave. I turned my head and took a long look at Tony. That's when Tony looked at me curiously and asked, What is it? I answered, Nothing, and smiled. Tony stood up. Now you have to go to your interviews. Would Tom Jackson and Robert Adams please come with Andrea? She asked. They stood up and followed the women as they left the dining hall. The rest of us just sat and waited for our names to be called for the interview. In fact, I was the last person called, and I followed Tony down a hallway into a business space. Miss Ross was sitting at a dark wood desk, and she looked up at me while reading something on her desk and said, Please take a seat. Tony turned around and left the room, closing the door behind her. Miss Ross stood up from her desk and said, I'm sorry you had to wait so long, but we had to review your scores twice, and you have the highest score ever on the test, she said. I responded with a smile. I don't think that's ever happened to me before. Is it enough for us to offer you a job based on that alone? Like a maid or a secretary? I inquired, seeing her raise an eyebrow. Yes, that's right. Tony, Andrea, and those dining hall maids are really men. Wait, really? I knew something looked familiar. We will teach you how to be the best girl you could be if you accept our offer. What if I say no? You can leave this place and go on with your life, but you'll spend the rest of it hiding who you really are. It felt like an hour, but it was only a few minutes. They knew the real me, not the facade I presented to the public, but who I was on the inside. There were now 2 ways for me to live, to let out my dream and let the real me out, or to keep living this life of hiding. I didn't have a choice but to let my heart rule my head, and as I spoke, I could feel my heartbeat quicken. Yes, I'll take the deal. She smiled and said, "We knew you would." Extending her hand, she used the speakerphone to tell Tony to come in, and he complied. I heard the door open and the clicking of high heels on the hardwood office floor. As I turned around, I saw Tony approaching the desk, and I could see that she, or he, was grinning. Tony said, "I'm so glad you said yes. I used to be just like you. I was given the same choice, but they don't understand that there really is no choice at all. It's a lifestyle. You can't escape your real identity." I just nodded in agreement. "Good," she said. "I'll leave you in Tony's very capable hands." Coming out from behind her desk, she patted Tony on the behind, and then she left the room. "Given your score, you will almost certainly be put on the more challenging program. Others will be on a program that lasts 2 years or more, depending on who they are and how long it takes them to adjust to the program. I'll arrange to pick you up tomorrow and take you to the airport in time for the flight that will take you to NMI. Please don't worry, I loved it there and you will too. Now, just let me do everything. You'll probably come work here at headquarters as an executive's assistant after you finish. The more you put in, the better the position. It's been a long day, you should get some rest. Get some rest, you need it." "Thanks," I said, and then I got up and left the office. I was given an envelope with written instructions about the building and what to bring, which was nothing because everything would be provided at the institute, but I had to bring my ID with me. The driver was a woman, and she smiled as she picked me up at 7 a.m. I smiled back at her as she held the back door open for me in a full chauffeur's uniform, black pants, white shirt, and black tie. She closed the door, and I saw her short black hair and green eyes. She took charge of that car. We arrived at a nice-sized airport, where she parked the car and opened the door for me. I climbed out, and she said, "Someone will meet you inside. Maybe I'll see you when you get back." Then she returned to the car. After watching the car drive off, I turned and entered the airport building. Once inside, I looked around with a rising sense of dread. I stood there for a minute in the airport's lobby because it wasn't very busy, trying to decide what to do, when I heard a voice from behind me say, "Glad you made it." When I turned around, I saw a woman standing there in a black suit with a white blouse open at the neck, a small gold cross on her neck, and blue eyes behind black-framed glasses. Her black hair was cut in a classic page boy style that framed her face elegantly. "Follow me, sir," she said, and I did. We walked across the hall to the front desk to check in. She stopped right in front of the desk and said, "This is a customer for Labrus's private group trip." The person behind the desk was another picture of woman, but I knew the truth. Wearing a white silk top and peering over the top of the desk in a short royal blue skirt and light-colored nylons, that honey blonde hair was held back with a French ruffle. "May I have your passport, please?" she said. "Sure." I handed over my passport, and she handed it to the person behind her. I then heard someone typing my name into the computer at the desk and the hum of the printer. "This is your boarding pass," she or he said, handing me the papers. I looked at her and knew for now that was all I could think about. "Natalie will show you the way to our private room," she said. Natalie gave me a smile, placed her hand on my arm, and turned me around. "Come with me, sir," she said, and I followed her. I could hear her 4-inch high heels clicking as we walked. She led me up a set of stairs on the terminal building's floor. The noise stopped as we moved from the hard floor to the thick carpet. "Do you work here?" I asked. "Yes, I work as ground staff for Labrus Airlines, which is a real airline that takes paying customers. We also take care of the company's private business jets and, of course, these special trips," Natalie explained. "Did you go to the institute?" I inquired. "Yes, all of us girlies do. They'll decide what part of the company suits you best at the institute. They told me I couldn't be a flight attendant because I was meant for the ground crew. They sent me to cabin crew training, which I passed, thinking my dream had come true. But I spent most of my first flight in the bathroom being airsick. I thought that was the end of my career, but they moved me to ground crew. They knew I was good with people, just not up in the air," she said, finalizing her story. The plane won't be taking off for a while, so go into the lounge, get something to eat and drink, and relax. Someone will come and pick you up when the plane is ready, she said, as we stood in front of the lounge doors. I entered the departure area and looked around. There were a few rows of seats and a table set up around the room. 2 big vacuum flasks against one of the walls required you to pump the coffee or tea out by hand. I walked over, picked up a cup, and saw one flask labeled coffee and the other tea. I poured myself a cup of coffee and then grabbed a few packets of Sweet and Low and a couple of low-fat milk pots. I stirred them into the cup until it turned from black to dark brown, then sat down in one of the chairs. "Hi there," someone said. I looked up as another guy joined me. "Are you going to the Institute too?" he asked. "Yes," I replied. "How do you feel about it?" he inquired. Both scared and excited. It's a chance to finally live out my dream. "Is that why you're here too?" I asked. He nodded. "I guess so." 10 minutes after his arrival, the lounge went from nearly empty to almost full. 20 guys were now sitting there. Then the woman from the airport's lobby came in, flanked by 2 girls in full uniform. I noticed the small pair of gold wings on their right chests. They must be the flight crew. "Hello, ladies. My name is Miss Foster, and I will be in charge of your flight to the Institute. Mary is to my right, and Jane is to my left. If you need anything, please don't hesitate to ask a member of the cabin crew. They are here to ensure your trip is as comfortable and pleasant as possible. Please come to the front when I call your name," she said, scanning the lounge. I was sure it was me, even though she called me Miss, so I got up and went to the front. "Could you please give Mary your boarding pass?" she asked. I handed it to Mary, who smiled, and handed it back after a brief look. "Follow me," Jane instructed, and she led me to the plane. As we walked towards the plane, we passed a flight attendant going the other way. "Sandy," Jane acknowledged as they passed each other. Jane showed me to my seat at the very front of the plane and told me, "Please sit down." I buckled up and settled into my seat as the other flight attendant, Laura, watched from the galley while Jane returned to the plane's entrance. At that moment, Sandy returned with another man who sat next to me. Jane and Sandy shuttled men onto the plane, seating them while Laura attended to us already aboard. Simultaneously, 2 women entered and walked into the cockpit. They were the pilots. Once the plane was fully boarded, Mary and Miss Foster boarded, closed the plane's doors, and I heard the engines rev up. The plane taxied to the runway, then sped down it, causing my stomach to churn. I hated flying. After takeoff, I was fine. Mary did the safety announcement while Jane and Sandy pointed out the exits and demonstrated how to use the oxygen masks in case of an emergency.
"Hello, this is Captain Paula Stiles speaking."
The voice of the captain came over the intercom.
"Your first officer is Rachel Scott, and we're pleased to have you on this very special flight. We'll be cruising at 30,000 feet, and our flight time to our destination is 2 hours and 15 minutes. Relax and enjoy the flight. Your cabin crew will be with you shortly with anything you might need."
I sat there, watching the 4 flight attendants as they moved up and down the aisle, assisting with drinks, meals, or extra pillows. As I sat there, I couldn't help but wonder about what was to happen to me and the others on this flight. I also couldn't help but think about the Institute and what it entailed. A voice broke through my thoughts. "Would you like something to drink?" "Not now, thank you. But why did you call me Mrs. just now?" I asked.
"Because you're on this flight as part of the Libras group transition, we refer to all our clients with respect and the titles they are accustomed to in the company setting. You will be joining the Libras group as a Miss, which is why we address you as such during this flight," Jane explained, her tone professional yet friendly. "For this flight and the duration of your journey with us, you are to be treated and regarded as Miss, helping you acclimate to your new role and identity within the group. It's all part of the integration process," she continued. I simply nodded, absorbing the surreal reality of the situation. I was not just in the middle of a physical journey, but at the cusp of a transformational one that would redefine my entire existence. Deep down, a part of me knew this was inevitable, And strangely enough, I was looking forward to it with a mix of trepidation and anticipation. As the plane descended and landed smoothly, I peered out the window to see we had reached an island in the Mediterranean. This was the Institute, a place that marked the beginning of a new chapter for all of us aboard that plane. The days at the Institute flew by. We were 5 in the advanced program, separated from the others as soon as we arrived. We had our rooms, which were spacious and well-appointed, albeit in a bland fashion. There were 2 large closets filled with women's clothing in just the right size, and a set of drawers brimming with women's undergarments, socks, and base layers. The first day allowed us time to adjust. The next day, we had our first visit to the salon for a set of medical exams, measuring our height and weight, taking blood samples, checking our vision, and hearing. Then it was off to the salon, where I got a manicure and pedicure, had all my body hair removed except for my head, which was given hair extensions and bleached a light blonde. My toenails and fingernails were painted a light pink shade that matched the lipstick applied to my lips. As a group, we spent hours watching the beauticians at work in the salon. After all, we were to learn these skills as part of our advanced training. Then came the introduction to our tutors, all students nearing the end of their advanced training and looking exceptionally feminine, each with varying shades of long blonde hair. My tutor was Elizabeth, a striking 6-foot redhead with warm blue eyes and a welcoming smile. She was dressed in the Institute's uniform, a pink skirt, matching jacket, white silk blouse, baby pink silk tie, and baby pink 4-inch stiletto heels. "Miss Heather A. Alexander?" she asked, extending her hand as she looked at me with those blue eyes. "I guess that's me," I replied, my voice a mix of resignation and curiosity. "Don't worry, it takes time to adjust, but since you're here on the advanced program, it won't take long. Come with me to my room. This is all part of being your tutor," she said with a reassuring smile. I followed her to her room, which was decorated in an overtly feminine style. She sat on the bed, she gestured for me to sit. As I took a seat, my new name, Heather, still felt foreign on my tongue, yet Elizabeth's smile was encouraging. "It's hard to get used to your new name and role, isn't it? I had the same problem when I first arrived. It's strange to have what you always hid and felt ashamed of in the real world be celebrated here. This place allows you to be who you are. If you embrace that, you'll be much happier. What's your name?" she prompted. "Heather," I said, my voice stronger this time. "That's it, Heather. Say it again," she urged. And I did until the tears began to flow. She held me in a comforting embrace. "Let it all out. It's better than hiding who you really are. Your new name will let everyone know who you are." As I wiped my eyes with the cloth she offered, I realized the significance of the moment. This was more than a name. It was an identity, a persona that I would soon fully embody. "Your lessons start tomorrow, Heather. I'll pick you up early, so make sure you're ready," Elizabeth said as she stood, signaling the end of our session for the day. I returned to my room, sat on my bed, and contemplated the empty writing desk in the corner, knowing that it would soon be filled with lessons and assignments. This was just the beginning of my transformation at the Institute. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out Patreon for a lot more content and early access to YouTube videos.